So research methodology is basically your third chapter, or sometimes it is your fourth chapter. And when you're writing a paper, it might be just one heading and it's not any chapter. But for thesis, it is going to be your separate chapter. These are the dominant headings that we usually discuss in methodology. Starting from research design, we talk about population, sample size and sample technique. We also talk about unit of analysis, time horizon, instrument, data collection, data analysis, and ethical considerations. So we look at these headings one by one. Starting from the research design. First of all, we need to be very clear what kind of design we are using. Usually there are three paradigms through which we can do our research. One is positivist paradigm, interpretivist paradigm, and pragmatism paradigm. Now, how they are different? If you can look at these glasses, blue, green, yellow, red, dark red. When we wear one of these glasses, everything we look at maybe if we are wearing this red glass, everything will be looking red. If we are wearing this green glass, everything will be looking as green, and for blue, we'll be looking at everything blue. The same way, researchers have the lenses. Now, these lenses are their minds. How do they think that they need to conduct a research? So, let's suppose positivist paradigm is a one paradigm in which people believe in quantities, in numbers, and mostly, for example, they will ask a question from a child, are you hungry? And the child is very hungry, suppose, but due to his anger or something, if he says no, actually the child is hungry, but he's just out of anger, he's saying no, I'm not hungry. The positivist people are going to say, okay, he's not hungry. Why? Because they just go with the facts and figures. Whatever he or she is saying is true. Finish. But when it comes to interpretivist paradigms, they usually believe in qualitative aspects. For example, if they will ask the same question, are you hungry? And the child is screaming and saying, no, I'm not hungry, they will not consider it simple no. They are going to say, see, the child is screaming. See, he's feeling very hungry and he's angry at the same time. Actually, he is very hungry. So for them, yes means no, or no means yes. Because they look at things from the qualitative perspective as well. Some people say that truth can be looked at from both the angles, the qualitative and quantitative. So what they do, they collect data in quantities as well as in quality. They will be known as the mixed method. Most of the people who are going for their questionnaire research and collecting data in 1, 2, 3, 4, which means numbers, and applying statistical analysis are using the positivist paradigm. Most of the people who are testing their hypothesis statistically are going for positivist paradigm, and they are using quantitative research design. Some people also go for the interview, observation, focus group. For them, their paradigm is usually interpretivist, usually. And some people say, okay, let's collect the data in numbers as well as in observations. So quantitatively and qualitatively, if they collect data in both the ways, then actually they are doing the pragmatism paradigm and they are using the mixed method. For basic understanding, I think this should be enough. For detail, you can refer to some other books and other literature. And the same way we can here go for the qualitative or the quantitative research. What kind of research you are doing? If simply you are collecting data in numbers, it is a quantitative research. If you're collecting data in words, observations, or interviews or other things which cannot be quantified, then you are using a qualitative research design. So you have to decide your paradigm. Most of you will be using positivist paradigm. And research design is quantitative because you're collecting data in numbers. It is usually a hypothesis testing research in which causal relationship will be analyzed. These are usually quantitative and belong to positivist paradigm. First, we need to decide this thing, what is your research design. Then you can move to which instrument you're using to collect data. For example, most of you are using the questionnaire. Now, you'll have to see what kind of questionnaire are you using. Let's say if you have just asked a question and you have given some empty lines for people to report, obviously people are going to report in words, so that is going to be your qualitative questionnaire. But if you're making a questionnaire in which you are asking the respondents and you're taking the responses in Likert scale, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, actually the data that you're collecting, for example, if somebody is marking this 3, the data you're collecting is in numbers. So this is going to make your questionnaire a quantitative instrument. So your questionnaire is your instrument. Sometimes your interview guide is the instrument. Sometimes if you're using some basic science research, you might be using some more instruments, for example, a foot ruler or a vernier caliper. So you have to be very careful what instrument you're using. In social sciences, we are mostly using the questionnaire, and in questionnaire, we are mostly collecting the data in numbers. Even if you're collecting data in yes or no, and you are going to put them in SPSS afterwards or in some other statistical software, that's going to be your quantitative data. Usually it has 2 parts, demographics and then items related to the variables of the thesis. Now, your questionnaire can be adopted. You have to explain this in methodology, which means that you are taking the items from the previous research without making any changes in your items or without making any changes in the items that you have adopted. But if you have made slight changes to make it feasible to your study, then it's going to be adapted. And if you are completely developing it for the first time, you will say that you are developing an instrument. So this is going to be your instrument. Then if you go to population and sample, the simple understanding is that the people who you are actually focusing in your research, all the people who are the focus of your research are your population. But it is not possible to collect data from each member of the population. Therefore, we collect the data for some people known as the sample. Now, just for the sake of understanding, if you've got a pool of water and there's a lot of water there, if you need to test that this water is safe to drink or not safe to drink, obviously you're not going to test all the water in the pool. What you're going to do, you're going to take a small portion of the water and you're going to test it. If this water is clean and edible or drinkable, you are going to say that this pool's water is drinkable. This phenomena is also known as generalizability. That you are taking a small sample from the population, testing your hypothesis on this sample, and then applying the findings to the whole of population. This is known as generalizability, but this will also clear our concepts about the sample and the population. So if, let's say, a population is all the students of one university, you will not be able to collect data from all the students. So if, let's suppose there are 5,000 students in a university, you might be collecting data from 500 or maybe 300, and you're applying your test to these 300, and then you will be generalizing your findings to all the 5,000 people. So this is how we differentiate between a population and sample. Now, in methodology section, you need to be very clear, and you should be telling your reader that what is your population, who are going to be people which you are focusing in your study, and then out of the population, how you are going to draw the sample and why. For example, if I say my population is 5,000 and I'm going to take data from 300 people, why I'm going to take data from 300 people? So this, you will have to go to the concept of sample calculation concept, and there are many methods, statistical methods to calculate sample. So this is about your population and sample, and you'll have to be very careful about describing the population and sample in your research. And there can be many sampling techniques. We won't discuss them in detail here. We'll discuss them in detail in some other class. So there can be non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is defined as the sampling technique in which the researcher selects sample based on the subjective judgment of the researcher rather than a random selection. So non-probability sampling is a sampling method in which all members of the population have an equal chance of participating in the study, unlike probability sampling. So when all the population have the equal chance of being representative, for example, if this is our population, if everybody has an equal chance, you're not being biased, you're not being judgmental about your sampling, and anyone can be part of your sample, then it is a non-probability sampling. It's a good way of sampling, but it is not never possible. It is not mostly possible. When you go to, for example, there's one method of non-probability sampling known as convenience sampling, where you just go to people, ask them to fill the questionnaire or ask them to give you an interview. It is a non-probability sampling technique where samples are selected from the population only because they are conveniently available to the researcher. For example, if somebody is working somewhere and he goes to those co-workers and asks them to fill a questionnaire. So an example of convenience sampling would be using student volunteers known to the researcher. For example, if you're doing your thesis and your study involves some consumers, you're going to collect data from your class or maybe from the other section because it is convenient for you. Other than going to everybody from different classes, you will just go to your own class and maybe to the same class or the section. Then there can be this quota sampling. We'll talk about this, that you make quotas of people. For example, if you say that you have 4 provinces, you have to collect a sample of 1,000 people. You're going to say 250 from each province. If you do this, you're actually kind of taking a quota. Or you can say, if you have a mix of gender, you're going to say 50 are going to be females and 50 are going to be males. Again, you are going to form a quota. This is one technique which is also used, snowball sampling, but this technique is usually used for kind of researches where it is very difficult to find or locate the people who you want to take data from. So snowball sampling helps researchers find a sample when they are difficult to locate. Researchers use this technique when the sample size is very small, known sample size is very small and not easily available. The sampling system works like the referral program or a snowball, which becomes bigger with the passage of time. Once the researcher finds suitable subject, he asks them for the assistance to seek similar subject to form a considerably good sample size. So what you do, first of all, what kind of studies require snowball sampling? Studies like, if you want to collect data regarding drugs, who takes drugs? Now, that's a very difficult question. You don't know. You don't have any person is known or officially known. So what you do, if you have a contact with one person, one such person, you take data from him and then you can ask him to give you the name of some other person, because he might be in the same company. And the second can lead to third and fourth, and then again fifth and sixth people. So starting from one, you are taking the references and you're moving, and like a snowball, when you're moving, the snowball is becoming bigger and bigger, sample size is also becoming bigger and bigger. Then we have the probability sampling. It is defined as a sampling technique in which researchers choose a sample from a larger population using method based on the theory of probability. For the participation to be considered as a probability sampling, he must be selected using a random sample. You need to have a list of population to use probability sampling. For example, if you have employees in one organization and you have a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you say that, okay, we will be collecting data from every second person. So this, you will be collecting data from these 3 people. So this is your probability sampling. It can be simple random sampling. Simple random means you take a bucket, you put the checks in it with the names of the employees, and then you ask some person to take, for example, 10 chits from this basket. So these 10 people are going to be your sample size. Or you can be, you can also be systematic random sample. Systematic. System is that you are going to come with a system 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're going to say that my system of collecting data is that I'll be collecting data from each even number person. So 2, 4, 6, and 8 are going to be your sample. So you can also do that. Then you have the census. Census is when you are collecting data from everybody, all the population. A census is a study of every unit. Everyone and everything in a population is included. all the items or units of the population are sample. For example, if the population is 500 people, you're going to collect data from all 500. This is going to be census. Then we have the unit of analysis and time horizon. So we look at the unit of analysis. For example, your unit of analysis can be individual, it can be a group, it can be an organization, or it can be an industry. For other social sciences, it can also be, say, a city, a province, or a country. So, for example, if you have a study which says that you want to know the employee satisfaction level, you're talking about individuals. But if you have a study in which you're interested to know about the group performance, then you're talking about your unit of analysis is the group. Sometimes you say that you're interested to know the performance of the organizations. So your unit of analysis can be organization, and sometimes you're interested to know the industry related things. And sometimes in social sciences, when you want to know the export ranking of countries, so your unit of analysis is one country. Then we have another concept which is known as time horizon. Now this is again a little technical. Most of the people think that time horizon is the time that you have to spend in order to complete your research. Most people take the concept of this time horizon as completion time of the research, but this is a misconception. Time horizon is actually a time horizon in terms of data collection. It talks about the time related to data collection. Now, there are two types of time horizon. One is known as cross-sectional time horizon, and the other is known as longitudinal time horizon. How these two are different? Let's suppose your research is that you want to know the impact of leadership on employee motivation. Let's suppose this is your theoretical framework. You have made the questionnaire. You take this questionnaire to a person and you ask the questions related to leadership and you ask the question related to employee motivation at one time only. So you're interacting with this respondent once only. You have collected the data. When you come back, you're going to analyze the two variables data and you're going to say that yes, there's a relationship between leadership and motivation. But let's suppose there are some studies in which you might have to collect data at multiple times. Because in the previous example, we only collected data at one point of time from one person. But in some studies, let's say, if you want to know the impact of training, that how training is changing the performance of the employees. So what you do, you take the data at T1, which is before training, and you take the data before training, and you see that person is making 10 products per day. So this data was collected at point T1 data before training, and then some event took place, or maybe there's a time in between. Then you give the training to a person, and then after he or she got the training, you collect the data again from the same person after training data, and then you compare these two data, and then you analyze, yes, it was 10 and now it is 14. That means there is an improvement of 4 products per day because of this training. But in order to do this kind of research, you had to collect data before, which is T1 before training, and then after training, which is your T2. So you're actually collecting data twice from the same person at different times. So this kind of data collection will be known as longitudinal, T1 and T2. And if you're only collecting data at one point of time, this will be known as cross-sectional data. You also have to tell your reader that what kind of data in terms of time horizon that you're using. Most of you are using the cross-sectional research because you're only collecting data at one point of time. But some researchers these days are also using longitudinal data. They take data at T1 about one variable, and then they take another data at T2 for the second variable. Then you also will have to relate how you are going to collect data. We've already talked about a questionnaire, but you have to explain yourself now. For example, you're going to say that data is collected using a survey-based questionnaire. The questions were made in Google form and the link was sent to the respondents, or you can say the questionnaire hard copy was presented or mailed to the respondent at their workplace, or you might have collected data otherwise. The respondents were given 3 reminders to fill the questionnaire, and if they did not fill it, then you did not give them the 4th reminder. And then you can say that the HR department was contacted to fill the questionnaire, or the customers were requested to fill the questionnaire after buying a product from XYZ store. Or if you're collecting a secondary data, you can say that the annual reports were obtained from the World Bank's database and the revenues of the companies were recorded on an annual basis. So actually in the data collection procedure, you will have to tell the reader how you have collected data, or when you're writing a proposal, you will have to say how you will be collecting data. Then another important thing is the data analysis. Okay, you've collected the data, but how you're going to analyze it? So this is where you'll be explaining a few things, that the data is analyzed statistically using, for example, SPSS software or eView software or NVivo software maybe for the qualitative data. The analysis was conducted using the following tests. For example, pilot test was conducted. Demographics were conducted. We'll talk about these tests when we'll be doing our SPSS workshop. Reliability analysis. And then descriptive analysis was done. Correlation was done. Direct hypothesis testing was done using regression method. And indirect tests were done. But the main thing to understand here is that you'll have to explain yourself how you have collected data and then how you have analyzed it. So people are interested to know how you have analyzed it because they also sometimes need to replicate your study, repeat the same thing. This is how you can write your data analysis paragraph, that why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and what methods, what software you're using. Then another thing is the ethical consideration that you have to tell your reader. For example, the data that you are collecting from people might be a sensitive data. For example, if you're asking some employees about their supervisor and you want them to be honest about it, so they will not be answering you honestly because of the fear that you might share the data with their supervisor. So, and for other reasons, you need to give your respondents this ethical consideration, that all the ethical things were considered while collecting the data for this research. The participation was out of free consent and voluntary, which means you did not force anyone. Respondents were given surety that the data will not be disclosed to anyone for any purpose, and then the data will be kept confidential and anonymous, which means no names will be tagged with the data. So most of the times when you are building a questionnaire or making a questionnaire, you don't ask for this thing, or even if you ask for the names and other things, you put a word optional in front of it if you want to give it. Otherwise, it is optional. The data will be used only for research purposes, and the findings can be shared with the respondents upon request. The participants have the full right to withdraw from the research at any point of time. The data will be handled only by the researcher and will not be shared with anyone for any purpose. The data will not be forged by the researcher, and no window dressing will be done with this data, which means if somebody has given you 5, you cannot make it 1. So you need to give the ethical consideration to your reader and to your respondents. These are the most popular headings of the methodology.